At the annual regional managers' dinner, Dale watched Brenda glide across the ballroom, her hand tucked into a stranger's arm. Her laugh, usually reserved for him, rang out freely. He walked towards them, a tight smile on his face. She met his gaze, her eyes cold and unfamiliar. "Dale," she announced, her voice clear over the clinking glasses. "Chad and I are leaving tonight." His heart seized, a public declaration of abandonment. Dale Peterson sat motionless at his kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet space, a constant, low thrum against Brenda's words. She was explaining the divorce papers spread between them, her voice calm and even. Dale barely registered the specific phrases, only the cold, factual tone that replaced the warmth of 2 decades. Brenda outlined the terms, listing off assets as if reading from a grocery list. He would keep the house, the cars, the bank accounts. "I ask for absolutely nothing," she said, her hands resting flat on the table. The gesture felt hollow, not generous, a final statement of her complete detachment. It was meant to highlight his supposed gain while stripping him of everything else. Dale's mind reeled back through 25 years. He saw their home in the suburbs, the modest but comfortable rooms. He pictured Abby and Sarah, his twin daughters, now away at Columbia University. A seemingly perfect life, built brick by brick, now crumbling without warning. He had believed in its permanence, its sturdy foundation. He managed to speak, his throat surprisingly clear. "Why?" Brenda hesitated for a moment, her gaze unblinking. Then, almost clinical, she delivered the blow. "I found someone else." She continued, her voice gaining a certain detached pride. "Chad Nelson, a real estate developer. He has a beautiful apartment overlooking the river. He's handsome, rich, and madly in love with me." She painted a picture of a life Dale couldn't provide, a world beyond their comfortable Midwest existence. She subtly contrasted Chad's ambition with Dale's own. "He's making things happen, Dale. You're still a grocery clerk." The words were a quiet, precise cut. Dale felt the familiar sting, a reminder of the promotion he had turned down years ago. He had wanted to keep his family rooted here, close to her parents, to the girls' school. He had sacrificed for stability, a different kind of ambition. "What's his name?" Dale asked again, his voice surprisingly steady. "Chad Nelson," she repeated, "president of Keystone Development." The title hung in the air, weighty and impressive. "How long?" Dale's voice remained flat, betraying little of the tremor inside him. 6 months. "You slept with him?" The directness of the question seemed to momentarily break her composure. Her eyes darted, then fixed on him, hard and resolute. "Yes, I was still married. I cheated on you." She offered no apology, only the stark truth. Numb, Dale picked up the papers. His hand didn't shake as he signed his name, the pen scratching faintly on the legal document. He pushed them back across the table. Done. He had nothing left to say. As he turned to leave the kitchen, Brenda's own composure finally shattered. "He wasn't better than you, Dale. Just different. Don't you dare walk away believing that." Her voice was sharp, a desperate cry in the sudden silence. Dale kept walking. In the days that followed, Dale began to notice the subtle changes. Evidence of Brenda's slow departure was everywhere. A blank spot on the bedroom wall where a cherished photograph used to hang. The absence of her favorite porcelain figurine from the mantelpiece. The house felt slowly stripped of her personal touch, like a museum being quietly dismantled. Her silver Volvo, however, still sat in the driveway, a lingering ghost. On the kitchen table, beneath a magnet holding a grocery list, he found a power of attorney. It authorized him to sell the house and the car. Her planning had been meticulous, calculated. He spent that night on the couch drinking cheap beer, feeling the finality of it all settle deep in his bones. The house was his, the cars were his, but the life was gone. The next morning, Dale called work. He requested 3 months vacation, citing personal matters. No one pressed for details. He systematically began disconnecting himself from his old life. The landline was canceled. He called his cell provider and changed his number, then canceled Brenda's phone outright. He needed to cut the ties clean. He called Abby and Sarah, offering a brief, sanitized explanation. "Your mother and I are separating. It's mutual." He gave no further details, no hint of the infidelity, the betrayal. He wouldn't burden them with that. Not yet. He just told them he loved them, and he would keep them updated. The first thing Dale did was get rid of Brenda's Volvo. He called a dealership an hour away, not wanting to see it driven around town. They offered him its low book value and he took it. No negotiation. It was a decisive act, a physical severing of ties, the last trace of her daily presence vanishing from the driveway. He called Dave Olson, an old friend from high school, now a seasoned real estate broker. Dave, and he said, I need to sell my house. Fast, quiet, no open houses, no big signs. Dave understood. He'd use his network, quietly approach potential buyers, bypassing a full listing. Consider it done, Dale, Dave replied, his voice solid and reliable. You doing okay? Dale just grunted, working on it. Dale then systematically streamlined his finances. He canceled all joint credit cards, opened new bank accounts in his name only, and cashed in his life insurance policies. The money wasn't vast, but it was liquid, clean, and solely his. Simplicity, he found, had a certain stark beauty. He moved through the house with a cold efficiency, methodically cleaning it out. Brenda's remaining items, a silk scarf in the closet, a half-used bottle of lotion on the bathroom counter, went into black trash bags. There was no sentimentality. His daughter's belongings, however, were carefully boxed and stored in the attic, labeled for later. Every photograph of Brenda was collected, then summarily discarded, tossed into the bottom of a garbage can. He didn't want any visual reminders. A profound lack of direction gnawed at him in the quiet hours. He filled the time with his quiet hobbies. Coin collecting offered a meticulous focus, the tiny details of each piece demanding his full attention. Geocaching took him into the rolling hills and dense woods. The search for a hidden cache, a small, tangible goal in a world suddenly devoid of larger ones. Then the Wall Street Journal started arriving, a subscription from Abby and Sarah. He hadn't read it much before, but now he devoured it, focusing intently on farm commodities, land values, and regional development projects. He started to see patterns, connections, the undercurrents of money moving through the Midwest. A new quiet obsession began to form. He researched Keystone Development, Chad Nelson's company. Every public scrap of information, news articles, press releases, company filings, was meticulously collected. He learned about their projects, their typical scale, their partners. It was a tedious, solitary task, but it gave him purpose. He tasked Dave Olson with digging deeper. Dave, he said one afternoon, you got contacts at that commercial bank downtown, don't you? See what you can find out about Keystone Development. And Chad Nelson, any whispers, any unusual dealings? Dave paused, then replied, Sure, Dale. I can make some calls. You want a background check or something more specific? Dale just said, everything. Weeks passed. Brenda never called. The only contact he had was the weekly calls from Abby and Sarah. Their voices full of an unspoken concern that was a quiet balm to his bruised spirit. They asked about him, about the house, never about their mother. Dale started holding yard sales on Saturdays. He sold years of accumulated possessions, old tools, mismatched furniture, kitchenware. Each item gone was a small liberation, making the house feel lighter, emptier, ready for someone else. He wanted no attachments. Then, one Sunday, in the society section of the local paper, there it was, a glossy photograph. Brenda, arm in arm with Chad Nelson, both beaming. They were at a political rally, dressed impeccably, looking every inch the power couple. The image confirmed everything he had pushed away, solidifying the reality of her new life. A few days later, Dave Olson called. Got an offer on the house, Dale. It's a little low, but it's cash, and they want a quick 60-day close. No contingencies. Dale agreed. Take it. A low offer was acceptable for speed, for the complete disentanglement he craved. And, Dave added, his voice dropping slightly, I've got that biography on Chad Nelson for you. Pretty interesting stuff. How about lunch tomorrow? Dale agreed. He felt a stir of something new. Not anger, but a quiet, calculating curiosity. Seeking solace that afternoon, Dale headed to Hayes Mountain for geocaching. The cool air, the rustle of leaves, the quiet challenge of the hunt. He found himself walking near the Madison Land Trust, a protected area he knew well. There on the edge of the trust's boundary, an old farmhouse stood, run down, surrounded by an overgrown orchard. A for sale sign leaned precariously in the tall grass. He noted its position, its isolation, its potential for a bulldozer. An old man in overalls, his face weathered, approached him by the orchard fence. "You looking to buy?" the man asked, his eyes sharp. Gus Miller, Dale vaguely remembered, a fixture of the area. Or just look at it. Lunch with Dave Olson was held at a quiet diner away from prying ears. Dave laid out Chad Nelson's biography like a dossier. Aggressive land deals, often involving quiet acquisitions from cash-strapped farmers. Cut corners on environmental impact studies. A few minor scandals, carefully buried with non-disclosure agreements and strategic donations. "He's smooth, Dale," Dave said, pushing a plate of lukewarm fries aside. "Always just on the right side of legal, but he leaves a trail if you know where to look." Dave's contact at the local commercial bank confirmed the rumors. Chad's latest large subdivision project, Riverbend Estates, was financially precarious. It hinged on one critical land acquisition, a parcel that would complete the planned access roads and connect to existing utilities. Without it, the whole thing would stall, leaving millions tied up in partially developed land. "He's leveraged to the hilt on this one," Dave reported. "Rumor is the bank's getting nervous." The next day, as Dale was geocaching near Hayes Mountain, Gus Miller approached him again by the old orchard fence. "Heard you were looking at my place," Gus said, his gaze sharp. "Folks around here talk." Dale nodded. Gus squinted at the horizon. "It ain't just dirt, son," he said, his voice low. "It's a legacy." The words hung in the crisp autumn air, a cryptic warning. Intrigued, Dale began researching the history of Gus's orchard. He found it was one of the oldest in the county, originally part of a larger family farm. More importantly, it directly abutted a significant portion of the Madison Land Trust, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving open spaces. Its strategic importance became clear. It was a key buffer, a potential choke point. He discovered Gus had been fiercely resisting Chad Nelson's persistent lowball offers for the vital property for months. Chad had tried everything from polite inquiries to veiled threats of eminent domain from a sympathetic county councilman. Gus, however, held firm, a stubborn bulwark against progress he didn't trust. Dale started spending more time with Gus, stopping by the orchard, offering a hand with chores, picking up fallen apples, mending a section of fence. He quietly observed the old man's deep connection to his land. Gus would talk about his grandfather planting the first trees, the specific varieties, the way the soil smelled after rain. His resistance wasn't just financial, it was existential. Gus, sensing Dale's genuine interest, began to confide his worries. "Property taxes keep going up," he grumbled, wiping his hands on his overalls. "It's getting harder to make ends meet, but I ain't selling to that Nelson fella. He'd just tear it all down, put up those flimsy houses. No respect for the land." His distrust of Chad was profound, rooted in a farmer's disdain for a developer's transactional view of the earth. Dale realized Gus's property, if acquired by the Madison Land Trust, could effectively block or significantly complicate Chad's Riverbend Estates development plans. It wasn't just a buffer, it was the missing piece of Chad's puzzle, the linchpin. Without it, Chad would be forced to reconfigure his entire project, incur massive delays, and potentially face financial ruin. He began to formulate how his knowledge of farm commodities and financial markets could be leveraged. He knew about speculative buying, about futures, about the hidden value in specific parcels of land when they intersected with larger ambitions. The idea began to take shape, cold and precise. Dale made the final decision to sell his own house directly to Dave Olson. "I need the cash, Dave," he stated. "No waiting for 60 days. Just get me a good price. Fast." Dave understood, and within a week the papers were signed. The house, the last physical anchor to his old life, was gone. He quietly liquidated additional investments, converting stocks and bonds into cold hard cash. He was building a substantial war chest, preparing for a strategic, undisclosed investment. This wasn't about revenge in the emotional sense. It was about leverage, about finding the precise pressure point. Abby and Sarah called, their conversations tinged with concern for their father living in a rented apartment, but also a quiet understanding of his need for independence. They didn't push, didn't question his decisions. They simply offered their support, which he accepted in silence. Dale delved into local zoning laws, environmental regulations, and the intricacies of land development around protected areas. He learned about setbacks, wetlands permits, the power of a well-placed conservation easement. He was learning a new language, the language of land and power. He began to view Gus's orchard not as a forlorn relic, but as a critical piece in a much larger game board, a small, seemingly insignificant pawn that could, with the right move, upend a king. A quiet resolve hardened in Dale, replacing the initial numbness. This wasn't just about Brenda anymore, about her betrayal. It was about making things right, about justice delivered through the cold, hard logic of finance and land. He saw a path, clear and unyielding. With the funds from his house sale and other liquidated assets, Dale made his move. He funneled a significant, anonymous donation to the Madison Land Trust. The wire transfer was carefully routed through a third-party holding company in another state, a financial ghost. He specified in a terse, unsigned email that the funds were to be used for the immediate acquisition of Gus Miller's orchard property, ensuring his involvement remained completely untraceable, especially to Chad Nelson. The land trust, surprised and buoyed by the unexpected windfall, wasted no time. They approached Gus Miller with an offer far exceeding Chad's previous lowball bids. Gus, relieved in seeing his family's legacy preserved, readily accepted. The paperwork was finalized in a matter of days, the orchard officially protected from development. News of the land trust acquisition quickly reached Chad Nelson. Dale imagined the moment it hit him. A crucial access point for his Riverbend Estates development was now irrevocably blocked. The main thoroughfare, designed to snake through Gus's land, was gone. Dale pictured the blueprints, the carefully planned logistics, all thrown into immediate disarray. Chad, Dale learned through Dave, was infuriated. He suspected a rival developer, an unseen hand trying to sabotage his project. His response was to escalate. He doubled down on aggressive tactics with other landowners, pushing harder, offering higher prices, inadvertently driving up property values across the entire area he needed for his subdivision. This, Dale knew, would only increase Chad's costs and make his project less viable. Leveraging his commodity market insights, Dale began to make a series of shrewd short-term investments. He focused on futures contracts for various construction materials: lumber, steel, concrete. He had been tracking subtle shifts in supply chains and global demand for months. He accurately predicted an impending surge in these commodities. Quietly, meticulously, he positioned himself for significant profits as prices inevitably climbed. Brenda, now living with Chad, started to show signs of strain. Abby and Sarah, during their weekly calls, mentioned it casually. "Mom sounds distracted," Sarah noted. "And Dad," Abby added, referring to Chad, "he's always on the phone yelling." Dale didn't gloat, but he felt a grim satisfaction. He knew Chad's phone calls were becoming more agitated, his temper fraying at the edges. Through Dave's contacts, Dale gathered whispers from the local business community. Chad's financial backers, increasingly nervous, were expressing growing concerns about the delays and escalating costs of Riverbend Estates. Every week that passed, every increase in material prices, every new hurdle, chipped away at their confidence in Chad's bottom line. Dale initiated an anonymous contact with a respected local investigative journalist. He sent an untraceable email, a subtle tip about Keystone Development's questionable past dealings. Old environmental violations that were conveniently overlooked, zoning variances pushed through questionable channels, the precise details Dave had dug up. He also hinted at Chad's current financial strains and the precariousness of Riverbend Estates. The journalist, intrigued by the specificity and the anonymous nature of the information, began to dig into Keystone Development. This introduced a new layer of public scrutiny that Chad, used to operating in the shadows of local politics, hadn't anticipated. It was a slow burn, but Dale knew it would erode trust, one carefully leaked detail at a time. Abby and Sarah's observations about Brenda confirmed it. She was less ebullient, less polished than before. The perfect life with Chad was showing cracks. For Dale, it was a small, quiet victory, not of anger, but of confirmation. Dale was now settled into a small, rented cabin near Hayes Mountain, the place where Gus's orchard stood. He spent his days watching the seasons turn, the leaves falling, the air growing colder. He felt a grim satisfaction growing within him, a quiet sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. The numbness was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. He understood the power of patience. He watched his carefully planted seeds begin to sprout in Chad's increasingly troubled garden. The land trust acquisition, the rising commodity prices, the whispers to the journalist, each piece was a lever, slowly but surely turning the screws. The local journalist's expose hit the stands with quiet force. It wasn't a sensational headline, but a meticulously researched piece detailing Keystone Development's aggressive history. It raised pointed questions about Chad Nelson's ethical practices, highlighting past land deals that skirted environmental regulations and local ordinances. The public unease was palpable, a subtle shift in the perception of Chad's gleaming projects. Chad, as expected, dismissed the article as a baseless smear. He issued a terse press release, calling it sensationalism. But his investors, already wary of the Riverbend Estate's delays, weren't convinced. They demanded an emergency meeting, followed by stricter oversight of his project, a clear sign of their dwindling trust. Then the construction commodity prices Dale had bet on surged dramatically. Lumber, steel, concrete all shot up, driven by global demand and unexpected supply chain disruptions. His market predictions were validated, yielding substantial unexpected profits. The money flowed into his newly established accounts, clean and untraceable. Using a portion of these profits, Dale quietly moved to secure his next advantage. He purchased several small, strategically disconnected parcels of land surrounding Chad's primary development. These were not large, contiguous plots, but rather tiny, crucial pieces, a sliver here, a corner there, creating a complex web of inaccessible areas within Chad's planned subdivision. Each acquisition was made through different, untraceable shell companies he'd set up, making it impossible for Chad to link them back to Dale. Chad now found his grand subdivision increasingly fragmented. What was once a sprawling, uninterrupted vision was now pockmarked by these small, unowned sections. He faced costly rerouting of roads and utilities, or the even more expensive prospect of acquiring easements from unknown, uncooperative owners. The headaches mounted. Brenda, living with Chad, began to show the strain. Dale heard it in his daughter's voices. Chad's escalating anger, the constant financial pressure he was under, it was taking a toll. Dale imagined her remembering his quiet stability, the steady, predictable rhythms of their life together. Was she, for the first time, second-guessing her choices? A minor regulatory setback for Chad's project became a major roadblock. The Madison Land Trust, now owning Gus Miller's orchard, staunchly refused access for critical utility lines. Chad needed to run sewer and water pipes through a corner of the old orchard, but the trust, citing conservation easements and protected habitats, simply said no. Their land was not for sale, not for access, not for anything that compromised its natural state. Chad's main financier, a regional bank known for its tough stance on struggling projects, had heard the whispers and seen the public scrutiny. They initiated a full audit of Keystone Development, digging into the intricacies of his finances. It wasn't long before they uncovered alarming irregularities. Loans cross-collateralized. Funds moved between struggling projects. A house of cards Dale knew was about to tumble. Dale, through Dave Olson, ensured that the whispers of Chad's impending financial instability discreetly reached key figures in the local business and political circles. No direct accusations, just quiet concerns, carefully placed, subtly amplified. The groundwork was laid. Abby and Sarah visited Dale at his rented cabin. They noted his newfound focus, a quiet confidence he hadn't possessed in years. They talked about their classes, their futures. They didn't know the full extent of his actions, but they saw a father who was, for the first time in a long time, truly in control. A few days later, Brenda left a vague voicemail for Dale. A hesitant inquiry, her voice softer than he remembered. "Dale, it's Brenda," Just wondering how things have turned out. Hope you're all right. He listened to the message once, then deleted it without replying. The time for those conversations had passed. Chad, desperate, attempted to exert political pressure. He called in favors, threatened legal action. But local officials, wary of the negative press from the journalist and the Madison Land Trust popular support, maintained their distance. Chad was becoming toxic, a liability. No one wanted to be seen enabling him. Dale walked the boundary of Gus Miller's former orchard, now a protected preserve. The old apple trees stood tall, their branches gnarled, bearing fruit for the wild creatures. He felt a profound sense of grim satisfaction. The land was safe, Gus's legacy secure, and Chad Nelson was entangled in a web of his own making. The commodity markets continued to move in Dale's favor. His initial investment had blossomed into a substantial financial cushion, far exceeding his modest expectations. He found himself with more capital than he'd ever imagined, a quiet power at his fingertips. It's in these moments, watching the pieces fall into place, that you start to understand how life's costly choices unfold. Stick around to the end to see how they truly culminate. Chad Nelson's primary development project, Riverbend Estates, ground to a complete halt. The regional bank officially froze all funding, and the county revoked his permits, pending a full investigation into his business practices. The half-built foundation sat like skeletal remains, silent testament to a failed ambition. The local journalist, emboldened by the initial public reaction, published a devastating follow-up. This article wasn't subtle. It revealed concrete evidence of Chad's fraudulent dealings, quoting former employees who spoke anonymously of doctored invoices, undisclosed liabilities, and backroom deals. The article painted a picture of a man whose ambition had completely overshadowed his ethics. Brenda, unable to deny Chad's rapid unraveling, confronted him directly in their expensive, now strained apartment. Dale imagined the scene. Chad, cornered, likely exploded, blaming some anonymous saboteur for his troubles, revealing the depth of his financial ruin and the desperate, cornered animal he truly was. Chad, in a desperate attempt to deflect, publicly accused a rival developer, a prominent established figure in the city, of a targeted smear campaign. He called a press conference, spouting wild accusations, but his claims were met with widespread skepticism. No one believed that the long-respected developer would stoop to such tactics, especially against a floundering project like Chad's. Dale, reading the newspaper headlines from his quiet cabin, felt a cold, quiet satisfaction settle over him. The pay the price he had envisioned was now fully in motion, unfolding precisely as planned. He felt no elation, only a profound sense of closure. Abby and Sarah called, deeply disturbed by the news reports. "Dad," Abby said, her voice tight, "what's going on with Chad? Mom sounds... she's not herself." Dale, for the first time, subtly hinted at Chad's true character, the kind of man who would cut corners and exploit others. He also spoke vaguely about the importance of protecting the community from such individuals, framing his actions as a civic duty. Brenda, feeling increasingly isolated in Chad's crumbling world, discreetly contacted Dave Olson. Dale knew this would happen. She was trying to glean information about Dale and his activities, searching for answers. Dave, fiercely loyal, offered only professional courtesies. "Dale's doing fine in Brenda," he'd likely said, "and he's moved on, focusing on new things." He reinforced Dale's newfound privacy, implying a successful transition, leaving Brenda none the wiser about the extent of Dale's calculated moves. Dale systematically liquidated his highly profitable commodity positions. He watched the final numbers come in, far exceeding his initial projections. The market had played its part perfectly. He secured his financial independence, establishing a significant fund for his future. He was, for the first time in his life, truly wealthy. He used a portion of these new funds to quietly purchase additional, smaller distressed properties, not for development, but for local conservation or community use. A small parcel for a new park, another for a wildlife corridor. These actions solidified his new public image as a quiet benefactor, a man committed to the well-being of the region. Chad, facing bankruptcy and looming legal charges, had his predicted public meltdown. It happened at a town council meeting during a public comment session. He stood at the podium, red-faced, shouting wild accusations, spewing venom, exposing his own desperation and guilt to the entire community. It was a humiliating spectacle, a complete unraveling. Brenda was there. Dale knew she would be. She witnessed Chad's public disgrace, the stark contrast between his promised life of luxury and this brutal reality. The illusion was shattered. The emptiness of her choices must have settled deep within her. Later that week, a mutual acquaintance, perhaps innocently, perhaps with a touch of malice, inadvertently mentioned to Brenda Dale's pivotal role in the Madison Land Trust's acquisition of Gus Miller's orchard. He really stepped up for Gus, the acquaintance might have said. A big anonymous donation saved the old man's land. Brenda, connecting all the carefully placed pieces, the anonymous donation, the journalist's reports, Chad's meltdown, Dale's newfound quiet confidence, experienced a dawning, parable realization. The pieces clicked into place, forming a complete picture of Dale's meticulous and calculated actions. He hadn't just moved on, he had planned. She confronted Dale in person. He opened the door of his quiet cabin to find her standing there, her face drawn, her eyes accusing. Her voice, brittle and thin, cut through the silence. "You did this, didn't you? All of it." Brenda stood on Dale's porch, her face pale, the accusation hanging heavy in the crisp Midwestern air. "You destroyed him," she said, her voice strained. "You destroyed my life with him." She looked smaller, somehow, than he remembered. Dale, calm and steady, met her gaze. He didn't deny it. "He destroyed himself, Brenda," he stated, his voice flat. "I just tidied up the mess he was making in this town." The words were devoid of anger, only a quiet, factual recounting. In measured tones, he explained. He spoke of Chad Nelson's unchecked greed, how it threatened Gus Miller's land, the land trust, and by extension, the wider community. He framed his actions as a protective measure, a necessary defense. He was going to pave over everything, Dale said, and run roughshod over anyone who got in his way. Gus was just the first. Brenda insisted it was revenge, a petty act fueled by bitterness. Dale shook his head slightly. "It wasn't about you, not really, not after a while. It was about quiet justice, about making sure the good things in this town, the heritage, the ordinary people, weren't bulldozed for someone else's profit." She looked at him, a dawning realization in her eyes. She recalled his words from their divorce, the quiet pain in his voice. "I think he's better than I am." Now she understood the cold, deep hurt that had fueled his precise calculations, the meticulous planning that had gone into dismantling Chad's world. Dale detailed it patiently. The anonymous donation to the land trust, routed carefully. The strategic land purchases, each small parcel a deliberate block in Chad's path. The commodity market plays, the quiet accumulation of wealth, the deliberate timing. It had been a carefully woven web, spun over many months, each thread precise and strong. He spoke of her grocery clerk comments, the subtle put-downs that had chipped away at him for years. He admitted they spurred him to prove his worth. "Not just to you," he clarified, "but to myself. To show that a grocery clerk could see more, plan better, than a man like Chad Nelson." Brenda was overwhelmed by the sheer scale and quiet precision of Dale's actions. It was a side of him she never knew existed, a force quietly unleashed, cold and unyielding. She had dismissed him as predictable, uninspired. Now she saw the depth of his quiet strength, a mind that worked with meticulous, almost frightening efficiency. She admitted her own naivete. "I was swept away," she murmured, almost to herself. Chad's superficial promises, the glittering facade of his wealth, had blinded her. She realized she had traded genuine stability, a quiet, dependable love, for an empty mirage that had now dissolved into dust. As if on cue, the news broke that day. Chad Nelson's company was officially filing for bankruptcy. The local paper ran another front-page story detailing the formal investigations into corporate fraud, the dozens of creditors, the potential lawsuits. There was no doubt left. Chad's luxury apartment was swiftly foreclosed. His polished Mercedes, the symbol of his success, was repossessed. Brenda found herself suddenly adrift, stripped of the life she'd chosen, the one she had so eagerly pursued. Everything was gone. Abby and Sarah called Dale, their voices filled with deep admiration. The full story of Chad's downfall, stripped bare of his self-serving narrative, was now public knowledge. They saw their father's quiet strength, his intelligence, his commitment to the right thing. Their loyalty was implicitly with Dale, recognizing his integrity against Brenda's misguided choices. Dale offered Brenda a temporary place to stay. "You can take one of the spare bedrooms here," he said, his voice level. It was a gesture born of duty to their shared past, to the years they had built a family, but it was devoid of warmth or any hope for reconciliation. It was an offer of shelter, not a bridge back to him. Brenda looked at him, then around the small, comfortable cabin. A flicker of her old pride, a new determination returned to her eyes. She shook her head. "No," she said, her voice clearer now. "I need to figure things out on my own." Chad Nelson faced complete financial ruin. The bank had seized everything. His carefully constructed empire, built on smoke and mirrors, crumbled spectacularly. The impending legal charges were just the final act. Dale imagined Chad staring at the walls of his empty apartment, the Grand River view now meaningless. Chad attempted a desperate flight. He was apprehended at a small regional airport, caught trying to board a private jet with a forged passport. The news broke with dramatic headlines splashed across every local paper, cementing his public disgrace. The mugshot was stark, a far cry from the beaming face in the society section. Brenda moved into a small rented apartment on the outskirts of town. It was modest, functional, a stark contrast to the luxurious life she'd briefly experienced. Humbled, she started over, grappling daily with the profound, undeniable consequences of her choices. The glittering mirage was gone, replaced by hard reality. She took on a modest job at a local boutique, folding clothes, ringing up sales. The work was honest, but demanding, a stark contrast to the effortless lifestyle she had envisioned with Chad. She experienced the harsh realities of diminished circumstances, the subtle snubs, the endless bills. Brenda spent hours reflecting on Dale's quiet competence. She saw now, with aching clarity, the true value of his steady, reliable nature over superficial charm and empty promises. She had chased a phantom, mistaking flash for substance. Dale, liberated from the burden of the past, strategically invested a portion of his newly acquired wealth into various local community projects. He funded improvements to the public library, supported a youth sports league, contributed to a scholarship fund. He became a quiet benefactor, his name appearing on no plaques, his presence understated. He established a small foundation dedicated to supporting the Madison Land Trust and other conservation efforts. This ensured Gus Miller's legacy was protected, along with other threatened parcels of land, preserving the natural beauty and agricultural heritage of the region for generations. Abby and Sarah returned home for a prolonged visit, taking a break from Columbia. Their respect for Dale was palpable, a deep, quiet admiration. They spent hours engaging in honest, healing conversations, rebuilding family bonds that had frayed with Brenda's departure. They had a candid conversation with Brenda. It was difficult, emotional. They acknowledged her struggles, but also gently, firmly held her accountable for the pain she had caused, the turmoil she had inflicted on the family. They needed her to understand, to truly see. Brenda, for the first time, offered a genuine apology to her daughters. There were tears, not just for herself, but for the turmoil she had inflicted on them, for the broken home, for her misguided choices. It was a raw, honest moment, a step towards a new kind of healing. Dale continued his geocaching and coin collecting. He found a quiet, enduring peace in the simple routines, the enduring beauty of the Midwestern landscape. The thrill of the chase was gone, replaced by a settled contentment. He took on a new advisory role for a small local agricultural cooperative. Utilizing his market knowledge, his understanding of commodities, he helped the cooperative navigate volatile markets, ensuring better prices for local farmers. It was a purpose beyond personal gain, a way to contribute meaningfully to the community he had protected. The town, once somewhat skeptical of Dale's quiet demeanor, now regarded him differently. They saw his steadfast actions, his quiet integrity. He was, in their eyes, a silent protector of their shared values and way of life. He never sought recognition, but it found him nonetheless. Dale and Brenda shared a final quiet conversation. It happened over coffee, civil, almost formal. They spoke of the girls, of the future. There was a sense of closure, a mutual acknowledgement of the irreparable chasm that lay between them. No anger, no recrimination, just acceptance. The marriage, the life they'd built, was truly over. Dale, looking out over the preserved fields, now lush and green under the late afternoon sun, understood. His true victory wasn't in tearing down another, wasn't in Chad's ruin. It was in meticulously rebuilding his own life piece by piece, reaffirming his core values, stronger and more certain than ever before. Months stretched into a year. The legal process, slow and methodical, eventually reached its conclusion. Chad Nelson was convicted of multiple counts of financial fraud and received a prison sentence that made the front page of every local paper. His empire was entirely gone, his reputation irrevocably stained, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and coffee shops. Brenda continued to rebuild her life, piece by careful piece. She remained in her small, rented apartment, working diligently at the boutique. Slowly, she regained her footing, finding a quiet sense of independence and humility she hadn't possessed before. The lessons learned were hard-won, etched into her new reality. She made genuine amends with her daughters, Abby and Sarah. Their relationship, once strained by the turmoil, slowly healed, built now on a foundation of raw honesty and shared understanding. They accepted her remorse, and she accepted their quiet disappointment. Dale settled into a new routine, his life rich with purpose. His advisory role at the agricultural cooperative flourished, his insights proving invaluable to local farmers. His community work, supporting conservation and education, grew steadily, and his cherished solitary hobbies, coin collecting and geocaching, continued to offer quiet refuge and focus. Then, he met Eileen. She was a local librarian, her eyes sharp and kind behind her glasses. They shared an appreciation for quiet pursuits, for honest conversation over coffee, for the simple, enduring beauty of their Midwestern town. Their connection was gentle, unforced. Their relationship blossomed steadily, a slow, natural unfolding based on mutual respect and shared values. It was a stark contrast to the dramatic, ultimately superficial passion of his past, a quiet, steady flame instead of a fleeting spark. Dale systematically sold his final remaining properties, the small, distressed parcels he'd acquired. He consolidated his assets, ensuring a comfortable, secure future for himself and, eventually, for Eileen. His financial stability was a testament to his own quiet cunning and diligent planning. He remained a steadfast supporter of the Madison Land Trust, attending their events, advocating for conservation, and donating generously. His name became synonymous with responsible local stewardship, a quiet force for good in the community. Gus Miller's legacy, and others like it, would be protected. One warm autumn day, Dale and Brenda crossed paths at a local community event, a harvest festival. They exchanged polite, brief greetings, a testament to the passage of time and the quiet healing of old wounds. There was no pretense of rekindled feelings, no lingering resentment, just two people acknowledging a shared, if irrevocably altered past. Dale reflected on his entire journey, the initial shock of betrayal, the deep, disorienting pain, the methodical, almost clinical pursuit of justice. He understood now that true fulfillment hadn't come from tearing down Chad Nelson, but from finding his own strength and purpose, from rebuilding himself from the ground up, stronger and more resilient than before. Abby and Sarah graduated college, pursuing careers that reflected a grounded sense of integrity, deeply influenced by their father's quiet strength and moral compass. They were steady, honest, and committed to making a difference, much like Dale had become. Dale found deep contentment in his new life, a life built on solid Midwestern values of hard work, community, and quiet perseverance. He had carved out a space of peace, earned through trials and tribulations. He frequently visited Gus Miller's former orchard, now a protected nature preserve, the gnarled apple trees bearing fruit for wildlife. It stood as a tangible, living symbol of his silent victory, his unwavering commitment to his roots and the land. The last vestiges of resentment toward Brenda had faded, replaced by a sense of understanding and even a quiet pity for her misguided choices. She had chased a dream that was never real, and he had found a reality more profound than any dream. Dale looked to the future with a quiet confidence, knowing he had paid the price for her betrayal, not with anger, but with a deliberate, principled reconstruction of his own existence, a life truly his own. Months stretched into a year. The legal process, slow and methodical, eventually reached its conclusion. Chad Nelson was convicted of multiple counts of financial fraud and received a prison sentence that made the front page of every local paper. His empire was entirely gone, his reputation irrevocably stained, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and coffee shops. Brenda continued to rebuild her life, piece by careful piece. She remained in her small, rented apartment, working diligently at the boutique. Slowly, she regained her footing, finding a quiet sense of independence and humility she hadn't possessed before. The lessons learned were hard-won, etched into her new reality. She made genuine amends with her daughters, Abby and Sarah. Their relationship, once strained by the turmoil, slowly healed, built now on a foundation of raw honesty and shared understanding. They accepted her remorse, and she accepted their quiet disappointment. Dale settled into a new routine, his life rich with purpose. His advisory role at the agricultural cooperative flourished, his insights proving invaluable to local farmers. His community work, supporting conservation and education, grew steadily. And his cherished solitary hobbies, coin collecting and geocaching, continued to offer quiet refuge and focus. Then he met Eileen. She was a local librarian, her eyes sharp and kind behind her glasses. They shared an appreciation for quiet pursuits, for honest conversation over coffee, for the simple, enduring beauty of their Midwestern town. Their connection was gentle, unforced. Their relationship blossomed steadily, a slow, natural unfolding based on mutual respect and shared values. It was a stark contrast to the dramatic, ultimately superficial passion of his past, a quiet, steady flame instead of a fleeting spark. Dale systematically sold his final remaining properties, the small, distressed parcels he'd acquired. He consolidated his assets, ensuring a comfortable, secure future for himself and eventually for Eileen. His financial stability was a testament to his own quiet cunning and diligent planning. He remained a steadfast supporter of the Madison Land Trust, attending their events, advocating for conservation, and donating generously. His name became synonymous with responsible local stewardship, a quiet force for good in the community. Gus Miller's legacy, and others like it, would be protected. One warm autumn day, Dale and Brenda crossed paths at a local community event, a harvest festival. They exchanged polite, brief greetings, a testament to the passage of time and the quiet healing of old wounds. There was no pretense of rekindled feelings, no lingering resentment, just two people acknowledging a shared, if irrevocably altered, past. Dale reflected on his entire journey, the initial shock of betrayal, the deep, disorienting pain, the methodical, almost clinical pursuit of justice. He understood now that true fulfillment hadn't come from tearing down Chad Nelson, but from finding his own strength and purpose, from rebuilding himself from the ground up, stronger and more resilient than before. Abby and Sarah graduated college, pursuing careers that reflected a grounded sense of integrity, deeply influenced by their father's quiet strength and moral compass. They were steady, honest, and committed to making a difference, much like Dale had become. Dale found deep contentment in his new life, a life built on solid Midwestern values of hard work, community, and quiet perseverance. He had carved out a space of peace, earned through trials and tribulations. He frequently visited Gus Miller's former orchard, now a protected nature preserve, the gnarled apple trees bearing fruit for wildlife. It stood as a tangible, living symbol of his silent victory, his unwavering commitment to his roots and the land. The last vestiges of resentment toward Brenda had faded, replaced by a sense of understanding and even a quiet pity for her misguided choices. She had chased a dream that was never real, and he had found a reality more profound than any dream. Dale looked to the future with a quiet confidence, knowing he had paid the price for her betrayal, not with anger, but with a deliberate, principled reconstruction of his own existence, a life truly his own.